So here I am, Star Wars: The Old Republic again, some more beginner videos here. This is a little bit about classes and maybe I'll get into companions. This is one of my scoundrels. I have a couple scoundrels, a smuggler scoundrel. And this is the planet Ord Mantell. This is where scoundrels, gunslingers, commandos, and vanguards will begin their class story and begin their adventure in Star Wars: The Old Republic. Ord Mantell, by the way, for Star Wars fans, and maybe you are if you're interested in this game. If you remember The Empire Strikes Back, Han Solo mentions Ord Mantell as a place where they ran into a bounty hunter who was looking for him. Yeah, that's where you're starting out. You're starting out right here on Ord Mantell. And if you're a Republic trooper, you'll actually begin up there. See that kind of walker sort of thing up there? There's a walker vehicle up there. It's actually a troop transport rather than one of the sort of assault vehicles we saw in Empire Strikes Back. That's where you will begin as a trooper. So you'll begin pretty close to this. So classes. Classes have mirrors in this game. They may use different weapons. They often use a different weapon. But they all function mechanically the same. They have the same kind of resource pool. They'll do the same kind of damage. They'll have the same options for specs, which they call disciplines in this game. There are only a few race restrictions which can be overcome. Unlike some games, you really can do anything you want on either side. For instance, I played games where a particular class had a restriction that could have been a restriction on faction, sex, or race, or any combination of those. The only restriction that really exists here is race. Like this guy here, he is a damage over time spec. He's a Ratataki. His race is Ratataki. Really, that's an Imperial race. When you're starting the game, you can basically only choose to be Ratataki if you have an Imperial character. However, I leveled an Imperial character as a Ratataki, and having finished the class story on that character, I unlocked Ratataki for any character I want to make. So I was able to use Ratataki on Republic side too. So that works all ways. So even that restriction goes away. Now, the classes, although they will be exact mirrors, so they'll do the same damage, the same kind of healing, the same kind of tanking, but the abilities will look a little different. So essentially, there's really no difference between them. Anything you want to do, you can do in either faction. So like this guy here, he's a smuggler scoundrel. He's a stealth class. Very fun. I love stealth. It is really fun. He could be a healer if he wants, or he could be damage. This guy's damage. If I wanted to do this on the Imperial side, I would make an Imperial agent and choose to be an operative. And instead of the blaster pistol and the scattergun, oh, I love the scattergun. I just love the scattergun. You would use a blaster rifle and a vibroblade. He's really melee. Although he can do long-range pistol shots, they don't do much damage. To really fight with this guy, you got to be in close. Same thing with the operative. So there's a little bit of aesthetic difference in that they use some different weapons, but the effects are all the same. Everything, the damage is the same. Everything works out the same. I could also be, and I have, a gunslinger smuggler. Completely different. He's a range class, not melee. He uses 2 pistols. If I wanted to do that, if I wanted to do the mirror of the gunslinger, the smuggler gunslinger, if I wanted to do the mirror on the Imperial side, I would be an Imperial agent sniper. But he would use a sniper rifle, not 2 pistols. Aesthetically, it's quite different, but everything else is the same. If you could play a gunslinger, you could play a sniper. You know just how they work. This goes across the board. So, what are the classes? So, as I've gone over the smuggler here, you can be either a scoundrel, a stealth melee class, or a gunslinger or dual-wielding range class. Same thing on the Imperial side, you have the agent, who can be the stealth operative, who can heal or do damage, or you'd be the sniper, who only does damage. Also, going next, let's see what's next. We can go to the Republic Trooper. You have the Commando or the Vanguard. Commando uses an assault cannon. He's ranged. He can be a healer or a damage dealer. Vanguard uses a blaster rifle, and he's really melee. Although, like, you know, of course, you can do some range attacks on your with your rifle, but really he's the melee class. All his good abilities are in close range. He can tank or do DPS. On the Imperial side, you have the Bounty Hunter, which is really very Mandalorian. Now, you don't have to look Mandalorian. You can really get any look you want in this game, which is pretty cool for people who really like to mess around with their outfits, their costumes, their appearance. I do. I have fun with that. I make my Bounty Hunters all look Mandalorian because I love the Mandalorian stuff, and the story of the Bounty Hunter does sort of encourage Mandalorian theme. Anyway, the mirror classes of the Trooper on the Republic side use different weapons. So the mirror of the Commando that uses an assault cannon is the Imperial Bounty Hunter Mercenary. Dual wields pistols like Jango Fett. And it's a ranged class, just like the Commando, and also heals and has 2 DPS specs. Then you have the Melee Bounty Hunter, which is sort of the mirror of, it is the mirror of the Vanguard, but he uses a pistol instead of a blaster rifle. He can also have, he has 2 DPS specs, and he can also tank. Then let's get into the Force users. We've covered the tech users. The Force users on the Republic side, we have the Jedi Consular, which can go one of 2 ways. You can go the Jedi Sage, which is a ranged class, so you don't use your saber much. Once in a while, I mean, if an enemy gets close to you, you can, you know, slice them with your saber if you want, but it does very low damage. It is a ranged class, and the saber doesn't have a real place in any kind of damage rotation. The Jedi Sage has 2 ranged damage disciplines, or specs, and a healer spec. As a Consular, you can also go and be a Jedi Shadow, which is another stealth class. It has a tank spec, and it has 2 DPS specs. It uses a saber staff. Very cool. I really like that class. On the Imperial side, it is the Inquisitor, which is the mirror of the Consular. So you have the Sith Sorcerer, which is the ranged class, which also has 1 healing. It's the healing spec, and it has 2 damage specs. Then you have the Sith Assassin, which is the mirror of the Jedi Shadow, who also uses the saber staff, and again has a tank discipline and 2 DPS disciplines. Then you have the Sith Warrior. You can be the dual wielding 2 saber using Marauder, which is only DPS, or the single lightsaber wielding Juggernaut, which can either do tanking or 2 DPS choices. On the Republic side, you have the Jedi Knight Guardian, and the Guardian, of course, just like the Sith Warrior Juggernaut, it has 1 saber. He uses 1 saber, 2 DPS specs, and a tank spec. So, although the names will differ for abilities and the visuals, the aesthetics will look different, they all function the same. So, if you like playing the Juggernaut, you probably like playing the Guardian. Now, I don't like Knights and Warriors, but it's a personal choice. The Knights and Warriors, so that comprises Marauders, Juggernauts, Sentinels, and Guardians, they mostly use the lightsaber. They have very few Force abilities. They're really saber fighters. When you go into the Sage and the Sorcerer, they really, as I mentioned previously, rarely use the lightsaber. They have lots of Force abilities. Kind of very interesting mix for me is the Shadow and the Assassin, the stealth classes, the stealth using Force classes. And they each use a saber staff, and they have a nice mix of saber attacks and Force abilities. So in a way, I really enjoy them for that reason. And I don't know, there's something about the Knights and Warriors, just I can't get into them. I just can't get into them. I got a Marauder at level 63, and I just never have the inclination to play them. Nothing wrong with the class. It's entirely my taste. So those are your class choices, and you can't change your class. You can change your specs. You can change your disciplines. But you can't say that, well, you know, my smuggler is a scoundrel, but I don't like it. I want to go gunslinger. You can't do it. That's you're stuck with that, so to speak. But leveling is pretty fast. They've streamlined leveling, so it's not such a big deal making a new class. Companions. As I mentioned in a previous video, on the first planet that you play on, during your class store, you will get your first companion, and throughout the course of the game, you will gain more. Companions can basically do any role that you want, which is a nice change. Some people hate it. I really think it's good. You can set them to tank, to DPS, or to heal. This is my companion here, so if I right-click on the portrait, role selection, I can do tank, heal, or damage. And it's nice because, you know, let's say your first companion is a tank companion, and you want to play a tank. It's pretty crappy having two tanks. I think so. Anyway, I mean, why not have the choice? Some people think, oh, dumb down the game. Dumb down the game. It's smart. It's a Trinity game, and it's supposed to be played with, you know, complementary specs. So anyway, I do what you want, but feel how you want. But I can't see the downside to it. I cannot see the downside to it. So that is a very unique feature of the game. And one I really have come to like is the companions. The companions do not need gear other than for, well, they need a weapon to use their abilities, but the stats of the weapon do not matter. Likewise, the stats on the gear does not matter. It's only for appearance. To make your companions stronger, you need to raise their influence. That is done through conversation choices that they like, which can be a little tricky, and through giving them gifts that they like, which is a subject all of its own. You can buy gifts, and you can get some from quest rewards. You give them the gifts, and their influence rises up, and the higher their influence, the more effective they become. It's good both if you like crafting, they get better critical hits on crafting, to get better results on crafting, and they do better in combat. So it's really worth it getting your companions to a high level of influence. So that is about it for classes. I just wanted to make it clear that although they may seem different at first glance, each side has pretty much a perfect mirror of the classes on the other side. The only differences will be aesthetic. In terms of effectiveness, they will be just as effective. And as I mentioned in a previous video, don't be alarmed by the idea that if you're a Republic, you have to be, oh, I don't want to be a light side character, but I want to make a smuggler. You can be a dark side smuggler. You just make all dark side choices, and it goes across the board. Light side Jedi, dark side Jedi, light side Sith, neutral Sith, dark side, anything. And you can change that at any time by making choices that are light or dark. So don't let that influence your class choice. So I guess I'll end that one here, and hope you got some benefit out of this.